Hello and welcome to another thrilling installment of Chat DPS with myself, Nick Lovell, and Robert Feldman. We're here to just pick up on some of the news items from the week and give some perspectives on knowledgeable incentives anyway. Not from me, but more from Robert. You know how it is. The first thing, Robert, that we wanted to pick up on this week is this massive, they think this is the biggest hack in the whole of history, sort of like the multiverse and what have you. And they're saying that these threat actors were inside vendors' networks this is telecommunications vendors' networks for about a year, monitoring what was going on in some key accounts. They were monitoring sort of critical phone calls for key individuals in the US, maybe up to 100 of those people. Trump's name was mentioned along with Kamala Harris during the presidential elections. It's also indicated that they've obviously hacked some high-level government sites as well as part of this, because they're actually able to say exactly who's under investigation and for what reasons. So it's really quite a concerning hack, and seems to be taking us down this zero trust kind of avenue. The other concerning thing for us here in Australia, I guess, is the fact that this actually started out in Microsoft systems, and Microsoft have been busy trying to shore up their systems, so to speak. Is what do you think? Did you have a look at this, and did you actually sort of understand anything further around, sort of like what the implications of this might be?
Yeah, so it's alleged to be the work of the Chinese government, and there's a
Right.
group, I believe they're called Salt Typhoon, and it's alleged to be an espionage project by the Chinese government, and so yeah, like you say, largest one to date in terms of the size of the hack and numbers of people that have been affected and the details that may have been spied on. So significant. I guess in terms of consequences and putting the Australian lens on it, I did see that a couple of days ago there was a directive or advisory that was issued by the Australian Signals Directorate through the ACSC. It was a joint advisory between the Australian government and then some of its, I guess, Five Eyes type colleagues. I think US government, Canadian government, maybe some others. And it really focused very much on monitoring of systems from a network perspective, and also hardening. So this is very much in that kind of techie space in terms of looking at your various layers of defense and looking to see if there's been any strange changes, configuration changes and the like, to see if, potentially there's already been a breach. I mean, I guess, like you said, it's in the US example, they were sitting there for an unknown amount of time. Could have been a year or years. And so I think part of the advisory is check your systems, see if there's been any unusual activity, and then really focus on your various layers of defense. And interestingly, they called out Cisco equipment in particular as being vulnerable to this particular alleged PRC, People's Republic of China hack.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how the ABC crowd will jump all over that, anyone but Cisco, yeah. But which will be fine. I mean, I think that the worrying thing from my perspective was the fact that it was actually started off in a Microsoft, stack
Yeah.
and continue to go from there. Um, I mean, that obviously has, connotations with regards to Azure and all the other bits and pieces that we see in everyday usage down here in Australia. So we don't know how far that's gone with these public cloud providers. So, and the introduction was done through the carriers, is my understanding. So, I mean, that's a really interesting place to start, I guess. If you're going to do something, go big and go home, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So look, I mean, the other thing that we picked up on was the fact that the Australian Signals Directorate have released their cyber threats trend report, and it's been split down into, well, three very, very easy sectors for us to sort of like chunk down in. So there's personal, there's business, and then what is considered to be critical infrastructure. It seems to me these days that pretty much everything is critical infrastructure. They've included payments in all of that as well, which is, I suppose, is not surprising. I mean, if you take out the payments network, then or the ability for people to pay, then you've got some real problems. But there's been some interesting bits and pieces that have come out of that. So if you're looking at this from a personal perspective, then identity fraud has been the number one concern for, according to this ASD report, followed by online shopping and online bank fraud. So people giving away, sort of like their identity, people being able to access bank accounts and so on and so forth. Maybe it's scams and what have you. Quite a bit of difference here, though, because if you look at the stuff that's going on in the business world, and they've split that into small, medium, and large as well. But the critical things in regards to this particular thing have been around email compromise, A, resulting in no fraud at all, but B, resulting in financial fraud, or financial hardship or whatever. And again, online banking fraud has been quite a big thing, according to that, in the business world. In the critical infrastructure world, this is obviously where it kind of, sort of rubber hits the road. Compromised accounts and credentials. I didn't realize that people were still leaving, passwords off of routers and firewalls and things like that. I mean, that's crazy, right?
Well, I mean, I think that links quite neatly into to the Salt Typhoon.
Yes, yeah, that is a good link, isn't it? Very,
Yeah.
very good link. Malware infection, but not ransomware, critically, and compromised asset or network or infra. So yeah, you're right. It does actually sit right into that hack in the
Yeah.
US.
And in terms of that advisory about making sure that you've got depth in layers and your monitoring's up to scratch and you've been checking all your vulnerabilities and all that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great advice, and people should be heeding that. I suppose the other thing that came out of that report were the costs, and these kind of surprised me a little bit because in the personal sort of column, you had this, the average cost to an individual was about $30,700 apparently.
Mm.
But for business, not seemingly that much more. Sort of 49,600 for a small business, sort of around there. A medium-sized business, maybe 100 to 200 employees, maybe is $62,800, and a large one is 63,600. But the truth of it here is when you get down into the little bit more of the detail of the report, where it starts talking about $84 million in
Wow.
losses. The thing that surprised me here was, I mean, I've been hearing huge numbers about, the hack that happened to Medibank and to Optus. That's 2 years ago, not last year, but 2 years ago. So, I mean, what's your take on that average cost to business? Interestingly, and this, I mean, I suppose, Optus would come under critical infrastructure itself, but there's no mention of what a critical infrastructure problem would have cost.
So, I mean, there's a couple of things going on probably. So, this information, I believe, is self-reported. And so those businesses may be just taking a snapshot. We don't know. So we're just speculating here, but they just might be taking a snapshot in time in terms of the cost. It just might be the immediate cost of recovery from a breach. It might be just the immediate costs of getting in third-party forensic or other IT specialists to restore service or fix up the initial impacts of whatever that breach might be. But as we know, and taking Medibank or not as an example, these things can drag on for years in terms of the remediation costs that are actually required. to resolve issues. And of course, there's reputational damage and the like. So the numbers are kind of interesting, but they probably don't tell the whole story. I mean, I think that the bigger picture is with when looking at these sorts of numbers is just the awareness that these sorts of compromises are happening all the time across sectors, and it's not going away. I think with critical infrastructure, look, again, there might be something around the fact that some of that reporting to the ASD may be confidential, and allows the government to understand what's going on in terms of critical infrastructure, but they probably don't want to publish that.
I can understand that.
Yeah.
I can understand that. The interesting thing about it was there with the critical infrastructure piece that they were suggesting that 36,700 calls to the ACS hotline were made, the Australian Cybersecurity Hotline, that is, an average 100 calls a day. And they are saying that since last year, that's actually increased by 12%. So obviously, I mean, cyber fatigue is one thing, but quite clearly, the criminal aspect of this is not slowing down in any way, shape, or form, and it's actually still going out. So they've responded.
Again, this is what's been reported as well. So I think a lot of this comes from the fact that the government's been fairly strong in promoting the ACSC, the ASD, in terms of what it can do to help in dealing with cybercrime. So I think there's a bit of promotion going on there. But yeah, there's probably still hundreds, if not thousands, of cases which go unreported every day or every year.
Yeah. So and the last actual pertinent fact here is the fact that the ASD responded to 1,100 cybersecurity incidents. So they only get involved when it's a particularly high level, I'm guessing. 11% of which included ransomware, and that is up 3% on year. So they're significant numbers. I mean, when you start talking about how these things are sort of like playing out, I mean, it's this concept of "she'll be right, mate" is sort of like is beginning to wear a bit thin, isn't it now? When you start looking at those numbers.
Yeah, that's right. And I suppose the other thing to think about is some legislation in some of these areas is coming. So whether it's ransomware reporting, and that'll get phased in over the next 12 months or so, or strengthening of the Security of Critical Infrastructure Act, or with the Standalone Cybersecurity Act. And one of the things coming through again is there's a 12-month transition period, but a minimum standard for smart devices. So when we come back to the Salt Typhoon hack, there might be a consequence or an impact there in terms of the sorts of routers and other, whether it's IoT or OT devices that critical infrastructure type sectors are using. So it does tie into the legislation, but the legislation will take some time to actually have an impact on what businesses do. And I think
profound statement. Yeah, profound statement there, Robert. And I think that 100% agree with you. I mean, it's going to take some time for these things to filter through. All the while, the hackers and the malicious actors are, sort of like honing their craft and making it a lot easier for themselves. In my opinion,
they're always a couple steps ahead. That's for sure.
They're always a couple of steps ahead, and certainly a couple of steps ahead of me. Okay, well, look, I think that concludes our episode for this week. Thank you, Robert Feldman, and I look forward to being able to view how this is going down in the metaverse, and sharing some stats with people about how this is going and whether it's actually hitting the mark. Robert, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it, and look forward to catching up with you again next week. This was Chat DPS.